Hello, everyone. Welcome to In the Corner, the place where every cricketer wants to be. I'm your host, Callum and thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. On today's episode, we are going to quickly do a review of the Australian and New Zealand T20 series, which Australia won 3-0, and we'll be previewing the important two test match series between Australia and New Zealand, which kicks off on Thursday. Should be a really exciting series. Rees, how are you, mate? Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Cal. I'm going well. Thank you very much for having me again.
Yes, it's good to hear that you're making some runs in the C grade.
Thank you very much. Only been averaging 62 last month, so I'm happy.
We'll tell the B grade selectors at Nair about that one. Rees, let's review the T20 series. Australia won 3-0, got out of jail in the first game thanks to some heroics from Mitchell Marsh and Tim David. A few interesting ramifications from this series. Australia were able to rotate the quicks, which I think was really important. But there was some question marks certainly about Steve Smith's place in the 11. But more importantly, I think there's questions about whether Steve Smith can actually make it to the T20 World Cup in the West Indies. What are your thoughts about the whole Smith situation?
Yeah, it's a very valid point. So my view from watching that series that just gone is there's no real place for him in that 11. I feel like he just didn't put enough of a case forward in the three games that he opened up top. And if he's going to be playing in a T20, he has to be opening. Like he needs that time up the top of the order to get his eye in and get going from there. So if he doesn't open the batting, then he doesn't play, in my opinion. So I feel like there's a real battle for him to make that final 11 because we've got so much better options that can go from ball one. Like you've got your Matt Shorts that can easily open up. You've got even Josh Inglis can too as well. You've got Trav Head and even Mitch Marsh had a go opening. So I feel like we've got better options for that top order spots. And from that point of view, I can't see Smith making it, to be honest.
Yeah, there's been a lot of question marks about whether Steve Smith makes the actual squad to go over. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that you can only take 15 blokes for these ICC events. And we saw what happened last year with Travis Head still being named in the squad despite having a broken hand. And, even 16 or 17, I think, is a much better compromise. It allows you to take two spare bowlers, two spare batsmen, and an all-rounder.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm of the opinion that it's between Matt Short, Marcus Stoinis, and Steve Smith for this last spot. I think the fact that Inglis is a keeper as well as a batsman who can bat anywhere 1 through to 7 in the order, I think his spot on this tour is pretty well safe.
Yep. Yep.
And obviously you've got the likes of David Warner, Travis Head, Mitchell Marsh, who are all locks in your top 3 at this point. Maxwell, Matthew Wade, Tim David, you got the big 3 quicks and you got Zampa. So not too much is changing there. It's just more about who they want to go with on the fringes. Nathan Ellis got a couple of opportunities in this series and Spencer Johnson played the last game as well. But I think the big highlight from this series has been Tim David. Had a pretty ordinary big bash, but he was able to respond in the games against the West Indies and was able to sort of get between that 30 to 40 run mark in most of his games, and obviously with a very high strike rate as well. So what do you think about Tim David? Because I'm pretty bullish on what he can do.
Yeah, no, you're spot on there, I believe. Like you said before, he had a pretty lean BBL, and even at the start of this T20s, there were a few questions whether he should even be in the side, but he's certainly performed the last month or so. So I've got no doubt that he will be in that starting 11, and I expect a big World Cup from him. I feel like he'll use the New Zealand series as a bit of a bit of a springboard for future performances, and go from there.
Absolutely, and I think we haven't seen a cricketer like this come onto the scene probably for the last 10 years. The last comparison that I can genuinely make is Glenn Maxwell with, David's finishing ability, ability to hit the boundary. Australia's basically got a white ball specialist for the first time who has no interest in playing Test cricket. And sure, I'd love to see Tim David play Test cricket at some point, but it's just never going to happen.
It's never happening.
It would be entertaining as hell to watch, though, if he got onto it. So, obviously it's not going to happen. He's very keen on going around in the white ball circuits around the world. I do think that he does play ODI cricket for Australia at some point, and whether they look to integrate him into that side approaching the 27 World Cup is will be yet will be a wait and see at this point in time. Reese, let's get into the test series. That's what we're here for. It's absolutely disgraceful. We were talking off air. Absolutely disgraceful that this is not a 3 test match series. And we saw what happened with Shamar Joseph cleaning up the Australians at the Gabba. People were crying out for a 3 test match series to decide it. And I don't know about you, but I certainly think that all test matches in the World Test Championship should be 3 test matches minimum. I would love, obviously, as many 4 and 5 test match series as possible, but that's not going to happen with the white ball circuits that are going on at the moment. And that it's really expensive to host Test cricket, and it's really expensive to play Test cricket, just obviously because of the longer time commitment. So, other than the once-off test matches, which I think can sit outside the World Test Championship, let's say Australia play in Afghanistan or Australia play an Ireland, or all those kinds of matches. I think all those types of series should be 3 test matches. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've got not much more to add to that. I completely agree with everything you said there. The idea of a 2 test series just seems like a bit of a waste of time almost. Like, I mean, they're not. Every test is important, but I feel like you need to have a decider. Just like we saw the Australia West Indies series. How good would the decider been?
Absolutely, mate. Couldn't agree with you anymore. It's been an interesting lead up to this series for Australia. It was a unconvincing 3-zip win over Pakistan in that test series, December, January. And obviously we know about Shamar Joseph's absolute heroics at the Gabba to take 7 for 68 to see Australia 8 runs short of the West Indies final target. I feel like Australia just suffered a bit of fatigue. It's been a big year, big tour to India, World Test Championship. Most of those blokes went and played IPL as well before that. Then an Ashes series, then a World Cup, and then 2 home test series as well as BBL for some of the players. So I think the fact that most of these players have been able to have that sort of 2, maybe 3 weeks off following that test series, it's going to be quite critical. A few of them, the quicks were rotated a little bit in the T20 series that we just touched on. It's been a really interesting lead up for New Zealand. New Zealand don't actually play that much test cricket anymore. They've had 2 test matches in Bangladesh, which was a 1-1 series over there. And then they played against a South African C-grade side. No disrespect to the players that went on that tour. They did what was asked of them. But the fact that South Africa sent a C-grade side to New Zealand is something that is utterly disgusting and a disgrace to Test cricket. But that's not the point of this video. Reese, what do you make of both teams and their form in the lead up to this particular series?
Yeah, you make some good points of the Australian form leading into this series. Like you said before, that they looked a bit shaky against Pakistan and West Indies. And okay, they won the Pakistan series 3-0, but they were quite lucky in some of those games. If Pakistan held catches, they probably wouldn't have won 1 or 2 of those tests and could have easily have lost it. Whereas you saw in the West Indies one, they played pretty similar. The only difference was the Windies actually held their catches. So that's why they got rolled in one of them. But yeah, they do look a bit shaky there, but I think, like you said before, a few of the guys that have gone back had a bit of a break. Some of them have even played Shield cricket. That refresh will help them big time in the lead up to this series. Like you have your likes of Cam Green's gone back and made 100 for WA recently, so hopefully he takes some confidence from that leading into batting at number 4 in this series. So I hope he gets some confidence from that, because we know like he can play well, and he's had a bit of a lot of talk around his spot in the side. So hopefully someone like him, he's benefited from the break and going back and playing Shield. And yeah, for the same thing for New Zealand, like they beat South Africa, like you said, they fielded a very weakened side. I'm not going to call them a C grade. There's nothing wrong with playing C grade, mate. But yeah, I think they just don't play enough Test cricket. So who really knows where they're at? But at the same time, I expect this series to still be pretty competitive.
Oh, you'd expect New Zealand to be extremely competitive in their home conditions, and they got a good bowling attack. The likes of Matt Henry and Tim Southee are always going to be pretty much a handful on those spicy wickets that you can get in New Zealand. But I think the biggest question mark for New Zealand is whether Devon Conway can actually play the first Test match. And at the time of this recording, he will be undertaking a fitness test on Wednesday, and the test match obviously starts on the Thursday. So if he can get through that training, obviously caught that pretty nasty knock on the thumb in the T20 game whilst keeping. But if he doesn't play, I think it's a great opportunity for Will Young to go back to the top of the order. Batted 5 in the recent Test match against South Africa, in place of Daryl Mitchell, who was injured. But I think, if he's able to go up to the top of the order and um, you know solidify a spot, I think, that's going to put even more pressure on the New Zealand batting lineup, because there hasn't been a lot of players who have been knocking on the door. Will Young's always been that next batsman in, but with Henry Nicholls, parting way, Ravindra's taken that spot. So I think it's a really important opportunity for Will Young, and I think he's got a lot of talent, a lot of promise, but just probably hasn't converted those starts into the big scores that all the New Zealand fans and selectors would be desiring. So, do you think Conway's going to get up for the first game?
Look, I don't think he will. Like, if looking at the squad, he hasn't been named as yet. So, like you said, he's doing a fitness test. So, I mean, I hope he gets up because it would certainly strengthen New Zealand big time. But I think he will battle because he did quite a nasty one in the thumb, and they can take a bit of time depending on where it got him and how it all pulls up. So, I don't think he will, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that what's going to play the biggest sort of trump card in this series is the conditions and winning the toss. And we saw on Australia's last tour to New Zealand, which was 2016, 2017, that the wickets were really spicy. They were really green, almost as green as the outfield itself. Australia won the toss on both occasions and sent New Zealand in, bowled them out reasonably cheaply on both occasions, other than McCullum scoring the fastest ever century in Test cricket in his last Test match. But overall, Australia were able to bowl New Zealand out quite cheaply, bat massive, and bat once pretty well, and force New Zealand out of the game. So I feel like something similar is going to be taking place here. I think that's going to be the game plan from both teams. We've seen Australia be a lot more willing to bowl first at the toss, which is something that I genuinely don't like, and something that Pat seems insistent on doing, and McDonald as well. Only worked in the World Cup final. That's the only time I'll give him that. But in Test match cricket, I hate it when, there's like, oh, we should bowl first, but they actually do it. So, but New Zealand is one of the places that you do actually want to bowl first 95% of the time because of how green the wickets are. And it's obviously very lush outfields. There's no chance of reverse swing. And obviously the wickets get better as it sits under the sun and it bakes the pitch. So, what do you think about the wickets that we're going to get in this series, mate?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very much the same. It would be definitely a bowl first type of pitch. Like we've seen that quite a lot over in New Zealand recently. So I don't feel like there'd be any difference there. But yeah, I mean, I'm certainly okay with that. I quite like having pitches that have a bit in it for the bowlers and make things interesting. The last thing you really want is a bat first, make 600 and only bat once type deck. Like I think having a pitch that has a lot in it for the bowlers makes the game interesting, and I think we need more of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, some of the test matches that we've seen in India recently have found a really good contest between bat and bowl. I don't mind wicket spinning on the first day, but there's obviously a difference between a game that finishes in, 2.5 days versus a game that finishes in, 3.5 to 4 days. Like there's a big difference between that. And yeah, I would highly suspect that captain who wins the toss is going to bowl first, but I still think creating these very green wickets is a very dangerous ploy for New Zealand. It works great if you win the toss. If you don't win the toss and you get sent in, this Australian attack could really pounce. And I just think of the success that Hazelwood has had in New Zealand on these pitches. Stark and Cummins have actually never played a test series in New Zealand, which is very hard to believe considering that they've been around for such a long time. Both were injured on the last tour back in 2016. So, New Zealand's obviously got some quality fast bowlers, Southey, Henry. Shame that Trent Bolt's not playing in this series, but the T20 circuit's obviously more appealing for him. But great servant of New Zealand cricket, as much as I like to get into players for choosing to play white ball cricket. Yeah, shame that Trent Bolt's not playing, but, New Zealand have got some good quicks. It's a real shame that Kyle Jamieson's not fit. He's got a stress fracture in his back. And let's talk about Neil Wagner, who decided to retire today, effective immediately, which is quite a surprise. I thought he would have been in the running to play this series, particularly with no Trent Bolt. The New Zealand could have used potentially that left arm angle to create some foot marks as well. Obviously, brings Nathan Lyon into the game as well, but um, what an absolute fantastic player he's been for New Zealand. Over 200 Test wickets, over 60 Test matches. He's taken 9 5-wicket hauls, and he's just a real heart and soul player for New Zealand, isn't he?
Ye- Yeah, he is. He's when I first heard that he decided to retire immediately, I was quite shocked because, like you said, I thought he would be right in the mix to play in his first test, considering the success he's had against Australia in the past. So when he announced that he was going to retire, I was quite shocked. So, but he's certainly a player that New Zealand will miss. Like he is a very much a heart and soul bowler. You know, he's putting in 100% every single ball, and he just bowls the hard overs. And yeah, I think he'll be sorely missed.
Yeah, I think he will. And at the age of 37, he's been an absolute warrior for New Zealand, and we wish him all the best in his retirement. I'm sure he will get into some form of coaching. The New Zealand players all speak very highly of him, and he does have success against Australia, which you talked about. 17 wickets on his last tour to Australia back in 2019-20, just before COVID. What a long time that feels ago now. But yeah, he was one of the players on that tour that seriously enhanced his reputation. I think the two biggest things for Australia in this test series is, can Steve Smith open in conditions that are not going to be favourable? And two, is Cameron Green really going to succeed at number 4? And, Smith obviously made a fantastic 91 not out against the Windies. He carried his bat. Unfortunately, Australia fell short in that game, but it did show signs that he could open. I think going to New Zealand and playing against the likes of Bolt and Matt Henry, who is seriously going to challenge his outside edge early on in his innings, that's going to be the test for him. And he's probably sleeping a little bit easier knowing that Neil Wagner's not playing in this test. Got him out 4 times in the last series that Neil Wagner played in Australia. So yeah, Cameron Green at number 4 as well. There's just so much hype around Cameron Green, and we forget that he made his test debut at the age of 20. He's 24 years old now. You know, he's still young in terms of cricketing, cricket timelines, I suppose. And he's just a player that we all want to succeed, and, had to sit on the fence a little bit just because of the superb form of Mitchell Marsh. But what do you think about those two blokes? And as you mentioned, Reese, Cam Green recently got 100 in the Shield, which I think will be important for his confidence.
Yeah, I think you're certainly right in terms of with Steve Smith opening. This series will certainly find out whether he can do it. Like it's not going to be easy for him, especially if they produce those green tops. It will certainly test him out and how he goes against the new ball. So I'm excited to see how he goes with that, and we'll be very interested because if he doesn't perform in this series, it will leave massive question marks whether we'll be able to against India in the next summer, which that's also another concern is if it doesn't work, what would they do? Considering there's such a long gap between the next Test series. So I think he really has. It's really important that he steps up because if he doesn't, then well, there's going to be a lot of questions asked, and not sure how we'll answer them in the meantime. But in terms of like you said with Cam Green, like I said before, he's recently turned up again for WA. So hopefully he takes a lot of confidence from that and takes it into the international game. So like he also said we will want him to do well. There's a lot of hype around him. So, but it's also time he starts making some runs in the Test arena because he's now in his preferred spot. As he said, he's in his preferred spot, so he's almost got no excuse really.
Yeah, I think I almost would have preferred with this swap in the order. I almost would have preferred Cameron Green to go to open and Smith to stay at 4. Obviously, time will tell whether this experiment is going to work. I just think Cameron Green, if he batted up the top of the order, he almost could have turned into a Shane Watson type player who could be aggressive from ball one. Like Cameron Green is naturally a stroke player. And I feel like when he comes in at 4 or 6, he can get bogged down really easily. And I think the better way for him to go is to play his shots. And if he nicks a couple, you're probably better off nicking off going hard at a ball rather than just nicking off and defending on, fourth or fifth stump line. Yeah, I don't know how this experiment's going to work. And as you mentioned, Reese, if this doesn't work, it has massive ramifications for this Indian Test series that's coming up. India has won the last two Test series at home against Australia. I just feel like our batting lineup has more cracks than ever. And for Australia's sake, Andrew McDonald and Pat Cummins' sake, I hope it works. Otherwise, we're going to go back to the debate of, is it Renshaw? Is it Cameron Green? Is it Marcus Harris? And I don't necessarily think, any particular one of them is the answer. But yeah, only time will tell. Reese, who is your most important player or the most valuable player in each team for this series?
For most valuable player for Australia, I'm going to go with Travis Head because purely because he's had a bit of a rough patch lately. Like he turned up against the West Indies in the first game, then he's got a golden duck twice in the second. But I'm backing him to bounce back from that, and you just know like how important he is when we're 2-3 down and he comes in and he just belts into all parts and he can take games away from you in a session. So if he's on fire, especially if the pitches are green tops, if he comes in and makes a quick 70 or 80, that can be the difference between making a winning score and getting rolled.
Yeah,
So he's my
absolutely.
most important for Australia.
Yeah, for Australia, I'm probably going to go with Usman Khawaja at this point, and he's just been so solid at the top of the order ever since he came in for Travis Head testing positive for COVID and hasn't taken a backward step since. So I think he's the most important player for Australia. The easy answers would be Cummins, Smith. But I think Kawaja's role in this team, particularly while Steve Smith's trying to establish himself at the top of the order, is critical now more than ever. And I think it's really important for Australia that Uzi does make it through this Indian Test series that's coming up next summer. So, yeah, I think for New Zealand, my most important player is going to be Kane Williamson, and that's obvious. That's just stating the obvious, but you know, he needs to do well for this New Zealand team, and if it wasn't for him scoring twin hundreds in the last Test match against South Africa, South Africa could have potentially pinched that Test match, and he's got 3,200, so he's tied with Smith in the Fab Four. He's certainly got the crown of New Zealand's greatest ever Test batsman at this point in time, and probably their greatest batsman across all three formats at this point. You could probably put McCullum and Ross Taylor up there as well. Martin Crowe's obviously been a fantastic player for New Zealand in the past. So, yeah, I think he's so critical to their success. Is there a particular player that you think is going to be critical to New Zealand's chances in this series?
Oh, look, it's stating the obvious. It has to be Kane Williamson. Like if he doesn't make runs, they just simply don't have a chance, in my opinion. They just won't make enough runs. But from a bit of a not so much a left field perspective, I'm interested to see how Rachin Ravindra goes because he's going to be equally as important as well. Like he has shown some really good form lately, especially since the World Cup. So I feel like this will be a big series for him as well. But as far as most important player goes, it just has to be Kane Williamson. If he doesn't make runs, then they're done.
Yeah, another player from New Zealand that I think deserves a lot more recognition is Daryl Mitchell. And I think it was the Test match at Lord's against England where Bazball was basically first introduced to the world, and New Zealand were in control of this game, lost a couple of quick wickets, and then Daryl Mitchell and Tom Blundell came out to the middle. Mitchell got 100, and it was the first of three consecutive hundreds in three consecutive Test matches against England. And ever since then, he's just gone on to leaps and bounds and had a fantastic World Cup. Been able to get picked up by CSK in the IPL for 14 crore, which is a massive price tag. But he's just elevated his game to such a level, and he's just such a likable character. I think the way that he plays his cricket, his shots down the ground are spectacular. Yeah, he's just someone that I really like. And I think Tim South has just got such an important role to play, the captain. He is someone that can get on a roll and take, 2 or 3 wickets in a clump. So I think he's obviously as the captain as well, it's not too often that Australia gets to tour New Zealand as well. So I think it's really important that he stands up and shows some leadership. Um, Reese, let's move into our predictions before we wrap up tonight. Who is your leading wicket taker in the series? Who is your leading run scorer? And what will be the result of the series?
Yep. So leading wicket taker, I'm going to go with Mitch Starc from Australia. I think he's going to be a really big role to play in this series, and I feel like if they do produce a green top wicket like they've been known to produce, I think he's going to be a real handful on that. For leading runs, I'm going to go with Travis Head for the same reason that I made him my most important player, because like if he comes in at number 5 and there's a bit of an early trouble, I could see him making a quick 70 or 80 really, really quickly. So he's going to be my leading runs. And for a series result, I'm going to say Australia 2-0. New Zealand just don't seem to beat Australia.
That's very true, and I would agree with most of that. In terms of leading wicket taker, I think I'm going to go with Pat Cummins, and Pat's not really someone that was spoken about too much tonight, but he's been in really good form. Bowled extremely well against Pakistan, took over 20 wickets in that series, in a 3-test match series, which is phenomenal effort. Took 10 for at the MCG as well. And then for my leading run scorer, I'm actually going to back Marnus in. I think Marnus has had his lean trot. I think he's had some time to go back to Shield cricket, and just get a much deserved break. It's been a big year for him. He was part of that Ashes World Test Championship, India tour as well. So big 12 months for him. But I think the fact that he's been able to have a break is super critical, and I think Australia will win 2-0 as well. I think our quicks will dominate their batsmen, and that's where this game's going to be decided. I think if Australia can make 300 to 350 in most innings, then that's going to be really critical. And it's not to be disrespectful against the New Zealand batsmen, but I just think our quicks are that good, and I think Josh Hazlewood is going to be someone seriously dangerous in this series. And the two of us have mentioned Starc and Cummins as our leading wicket takers, but Hazlewood, he can be equally as dangerous in those conditions. So, hopefully it's going to be a really competitive test series. We want a good contest between bat and ball, but we will find out on Thursday when the first ball is bowled. But Reese, just wanted to say a big thank you for coming on in the Cordon, mate.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Best of luck in the C grade on the weekend for Nair. Thank you so much to those of you who are watching at home. We have some really exciting episodes coming out with 2 Big Bash superstars, so make sure that you stay tuned to our social media pages for that, as well as our latest episodes on YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Make sure that you tune in for our next episode. Cheers.